California sunsets have a way of painting the sky with such breathtaking colors that one might forget the troubles of the day. It's in these moments of serene beauty that I find solace, a temporary escape from the chaos of my life. I stood on the balcony of my modest apartment, letting the warm hues wash over me, oblivious to the world below. Little did I know, those moments would soon become a precious commodity, something to be cherished in the shadow of what was to come. Life had been predictable, if not monotonous. I worked at a local publishing house, spending my days reading and editing manuscripts. It was a simple life, one that I had come to depend on for its reliability. But that predictability came crashing down one afternoon as I received a call that was to set everything in motion. My brother, Alex, was dead. He had been involved in a hit-and-run accident, the kind that leaves more questions than answers. I was at a loss. Alex had been my rock, my only family, and now he was gone. As the days passed, grief turned to anger, and anger to obsession. The police investigation was slow and fruitless, leaving me with a growing sense of injustice. I needed answers, but more than that, I needed revenge. It was during one of my sleepless nights that I stumbled across them, the cleanup crew, as they called themselves. I found their website through a series of obscure forums buried deep within the recesses of the internet. They claimed to offer a unique service, resolving the unresolved, dealing with matters that lay beyond the reach of conventional justice. I was skeptical, of course, but desperation has a way of silencing doubt. I reached out to them, detailing my plight with a raw honesty that surprised even me. I half expected no response, or at best a scam. But to my surprise, I received a reply within the hour. They were willing to help, they said, but there would be a price. I was to meet them at a location of their choosing, a place where we could discuss the terms of our arrangement. The meeting was set for the following evening, at an old dock on the outskirts of the city. As I drove there, the unease slowly crept in, filling the spaces where anger had once resided. The dock was deserted, a relic of a bygone era when it had bustled with activity. Now it stood silent and forgotten, much like I felt in the wake of Alex's death. 3 figures emerged from the shadows as I approached. They were nondescript, dressed in simple, dark clothing that seemed to absorb the light around them. Their faces were obscured by masks, each painted with abstract, swirling patterns. Despite the anonymity, I felt a strange pull, a sense of familiarity, as if I had known them in another life. "We're here to help," the tallest of the trio spoke, his voice a smooth, calming whisper. "But you must understand that what we offer comes with its own consequences." I nodded, my desire for revenge outweighing any sense of trepidation. What did I have to lose when I had already lost so much? "We deal with matters that exist beyond the veil of the ordinary," he continued, "and to do so requires sacrifice. Are you prepared to give what is necessary?" The notion of sacrifice hung heavy in the air, yet I found myself nodding again. The masked figures exchanged glances, and then the one who had spoken extended a gloved hand. In it lay a small, intricately carved box. "Inside you will find what you seek," he said, his voice tinged with an eerie certainty. "Once you open it, there is no turning back." I took the box, feeling its weight and the promise it held. Inside, there was a small, silver vial, glistening under the dim light. Without hesitation, I opened it and drank. The liquid was cold, sending shivers through my body as it coursed through my veins. The world around me shifted, the colors of the sunset bleeding into one another, forming shapes and patterns that defied comprehension. And then I saw him, the driver who had taken Alex from me. His face was etched into my mind, a constant reminder of my loss. But now, he was here, standing at the end of the dock, illuminated by the surreal glow of the twilight. The masked figures watched in silence as he approached, oblivious to their presence. It was then that I understood. The vial had granted me a view into a realm where intentions and desires could manifest. This was no longer the mundane world I inhabited, but a place where I could exact my revenge. The driver's eyes met mine, and I saw fear reflected back at me. A fear that mirrored my own. But as the moment stretched on, the fear began to warp into something else, an understanding, a clarity that unsettled me. The driver wasn't real, at least not in the way I had imagined. He was a projection of my grief, my need to blame someone for the senseless act that had stolen my brother. I realized then that the cleanup crew had shown me the truth. The monster was within. The realization was shattering, a confrontation with the darkest parts of my psyche. I fell to my knees, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. The masked figures stepped forward, their presence a silent support as I grappled with the revelation. "This is your truth," the tall one said, his voice compassionate yet firm. "To find peace, you must confront it. Only then can you decide how to proceed." It was a choice I hadn't anticipated. The cleanup was not about vengeance, but about understanding, about facing the shadows of my own soul. As I sat there, the surreal landscape shifting around me, I began to see the path forward. It was not one of violence or retribution, but of forgiveness and acceptance. Slowly I stood, the driver's image fading into the ether. The box was still in my hand, light and empty now. I turned to the cleanup crew, my voice finding strength I hadn't known I possessed. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. They nodded, the masks turning into something almost human in the dim light. As I made my way back to my car, I felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. The world seemed brighter, the sunset now a tapestry of hope rather than despair. The meeting at the dock had been a catalyst, a way to reconcile with the past and move toward a future unburdened by the need for revenge. But the encounter left its mark. There was a lingering fear, a knowledge that the realm I had glimpsed was always there, beneath the surface of reality. It whispered in the quiet moments, a reminder of the shadows that lurk in every soul. I knew then that the cleanup crew wasn't just a service, but a guide for those willing to confront the darkness within. Life returned to a semblance of normalcy, but with a newfound appreciation for the mundane beauty of everyday moments. The sunsets, once a backdrop to my grief, now symbolized the complexity of life, vibrant, fleeting, and filled with potential. In the aftermath of my encounter, I often found myself wondering about the cleanup crew. Who were they, really? Were they human? Or something else entirely? Their motives remained a mystery, but their impact was undeniable. I never reached out to them again, content with the peace I had found. But I knew they were out there, walking the line between the seen and unseen, ready to help those who dared to face their own demons. The fear, though subdued, remained a silent companion, a reminder of the choices we make and the paths we choose. It was a fear that I had come to respect, a teacher in its own right, or in the realm of shadows, I had found not just the truth of my anger, but the possibility of redemption. And in that understanding, I found a strange comfort, a quiet assurance that no matter how dark the night, there would always be another sunset, another chance to begin anew. The day dawned bright and serene, as if painted by an adept artist, the sky a vast canvas of cerulean perfection. I stood at the window, sipping my morning coffee, and soaked in the familiar sights of our neighborhood. The sound of children laughing and playing in the distance, the gentle coo of mourning doves perched precariously on the power lines, and the rhythmic hum of a lawnmower, a melody of suburban normalcy that resonated with the reassuring cadence of routine. Our home, a quaint little two-story nestled in the heart of this peaceful community, was an embodiment of dreams fulfilled. Stephen, my husband, had taken care to ensure its every corner was a testament to its devotion and love. It was here that we had kindled our love, and here I had nurtured the embers of my dreams. Yet, beneath the veneer of this seemingly idyllic existence, something intangible lurked, a shadow flitting at the edges of my consciousness, whispering its disquiet. As I finished my coffee, a sense of unease began to creep in, as if I were being watched by unseen eyes. I shook off the feeling, attributing it to my overactive imagination, and busied myself with preparations for the evening. Stephen had promised a special dinner, a celebration of our enduring love and the culmination of our long-awaited trip to Bora Bora. A honeymoon delayed by life's myriad interruptions. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the living room as I meticulously set the table, each piece of china and silverware placed with the precision of a ritual. I could almost feel the warmth of the tropical sun on my skin, the azure waters of Bora Bora beckoning to us, promising escape and renewal. Yet, the shadow remained, a specter that refused to be dismissed. Stephen arrived home earlier than expected, his presence a comforting balm to my unsettled mind. His smile was wide, his eyes twinkling with an excitement that was contagious. We embraced, a familiar warmth enveloping us, and the day's tension seemed to dissipate like mist under the sun. As evening descended, Stephen took charge of the kitchen, a space where he wielded his culinary skills with confident ease. The aromas that wafted from the stove, garlic, rosemary, and a hint of rich red wine filled the house, a symphony of scent that promised an extraordinary meal. We sat at the table, candlelight flickering gently, casting playful shadows that danced upon the walls. Stephen poured the wine, a vintage red, its deep ruby hue glistening in the crystal goblets. We toasted to us, to love, and to the adventures that awaited. The first course arrived, an exquisite rendition of beef bourguignon, the meat tender and succulent. Stephen watched as I took the first bite, his gaze intent, almost expectant. The flavors exploded in my mouth, a perfect balance of richness and subtlety, a dish prepared with undeniable skill and care. Yet, beneath the pleasure, a peculiar sensation took hold, a heaviness that settled in the pit of my stomach, as if the meal bore a secret weight. "How do you like it?" Stephen's voice broke through my contemplation, his tone earnest, eager for approval. "It's wonderful," I replied, forcing a smile. "You've outdone yourself." He grinned, a boyish delight lighting up his features. Yet, behind that smile, I sensed a tension, a fleeting moment of something darker, an undercurrent that was as elusive as it was disconcerting. As the meal progressed, the conversation flowed, a river of shared memories and dreams. Yet, the shadows persisted, casting a pall over the evening's joy. My mind, rebellious and unruly, conjured images of betrayal and deceit, fragments of a past I had painstakingly buried. Stephen had always been kind, his hands gentle, his words sweet. But even the kindest souls can harbor secrets, can they not? Dessert arrived, a decadent chocolate mousse, its surface as smooth and dark as obsidian. I hesitated, spoon poised in mid-air, a whisper of doubt tugging at the edges of my mind. Stephen watched me closely, his gaze unwavering, the smile now a fixed mask that failed to reach his eyes. The first bite was ambrosiole, the chocolate rich and velvety against my palate. Yet with each mouthful the heaviness grew, a leaden ball of unease settling deeper within me. The room seemed to close in, the shadows lengthening, the air thickening with the ghost of unspoken words. As I laid the spoon down, a creeping sense of dread unfurled, insidious and unstoppable. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm, my mind grasping for answers, for solace. I glanced at Stefan, his expression inscrutable, and in that moment I knew. This was the first disturbance, the rift in the facade of our perfect life. The night wore on, and with it the tension escalated, the shadows coalescing into a palpable entity that refused to be ignored. Our conversation faltered, words dwindling to silence, a chasm opening between us that no amount of wine could bridge. The following days passed in a blur, the routine of our lives a hollow echo of normalcy. The trip to Bora Bora loomed on the horizon, a beacon of hope amid the gathering storm. Yet the unease persisted, an ever-present companion that shadowed my every step. As we boarded the plane, the anticipation of escape mingled with the lingering dread, a cocktail of emotions that left me on edge. Stephen remained his usual self, affectionate, attentive, as if the events of that fateful dinner had never happened. But I could not shake the feeling that something had shifted, that beneath the surface of our lives, a darker reality lay in wait. The island was paradise incarnate, its beauty a living postcard that defied description. The days were spent basking in the sun, exploring the vibrant coral reefs, and indulging in the pleasures of the island's culinary delights. Yet the shadow remained, a silent witness to our every moment, its presence a constant reminder of the unease that had taken root within me. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of molten gold and crimson, Stephen suggested a private dinner on the beach. A surprise, he said, a gift to celebrate our love. The idea was romantic. The shadow lingered, its tendrils whispering a warning I could not comprehend. We arrived at the beach, the waves lapping gently at the shore, the air perfumed with the scent of salt and flowers. A table was set, candles flickering in the soft breeze, the scene a perfect tableau of intimacy and romance. Stephen guided me to my seat, his touch reassuring, his smile a balm to my frayed nerves. The meal began, each course a masterpiece of flavor and artistry. Yet with every bite, the unease grew, an invisible weight pressing down upon me. As the final course was served, a dish of grilled fish, its flesh white and tender, a realization dawned, a truth so horrifying that it stole the breath from my lungs. The flavors, the textures, the subtle nuances that lingered on my tongue, they were not new, not unique. They were familiar. Hauntingly so, a chilling echo of that night, of the meal that had planted the seed of doubt. I looked at Stephen, his expression a mirror of concern and confusion as he watched me struggle with the revelation. But within his gaze I saw it, the flicker of something dark, an acknowledgement of the shared understanding that dawned between us. "The fish," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the roar of the waves. "It's the same." His smile faltered, then returned, enigmatic and unreadable. "It's a special recipe," he replied, his words laced with a hint of mockery, a taunt that sent a shiver down my spine. The truth was undeniable, a revelation that shattered the illusion of our perfect life. The meal, the flavors, the secret ingredient that rendered it unforgettable. It was all part of his twisted design, a manifestation of the darkness that had lurked beneath the surface, unseen until now. I stood abruptly, the chair toppling behind me, my heart a wild drumbeat in my chest. Fear and betrayal warred within me, yet beneath it all was a chilling certainty, a knowledge that I was not the first, that there had been others before me, their stories etched into the fabric of our meals. Stephen rose as well, his demeanor calm, almost serene, as if he had anticipated this moment all along. "You see," he said softly, his voice carrying an eerie calm, "love is eternal, even in its consumption." I backed away, the sand shifting beneath my feet, the world tilting on its axis as the full weight of his words settled over me. The truth was a monster of his own making, a grotesque parody of love and devotion that had ensnared me in its web. As I fled into the night, the shadows of the past and present converged, a cacophony of fear that echoed through the darkness. The island's beauty, once a salve to my troubled mind, now seemed a cruel deception, the paradise tainted by the horror that lay at its heart. In the days that followed, the lingering fear became a constant companion, a shadow that clung to the edges of my vision. The world seemed altered, every moment a reminder of the twisted reality that had been revealed. Stephen's presence was a specter, his absence a void that echoed with the specters of what I had uncovered. The return to our home, once a sanctuary, was now a haunted passage through memories that refused to fade. The table, the kitchen, the remnants of our shared life, they were all tainted, irreversibly marked by the revelation of his darkness. As the weeks turned into months, the fear never fully dissipated, its grip a constant pressure against my psyche. I found myself glancing over my shoulder, flinching at the slightest sound, the world a tapestry of potential threats and hidden shadow. Yet, amid the terror, there was a resolve that took root, a determination to survive, to rebuild, to find a semblance of peace in a world that had been irrevocably changed. The shadow of Stephen's actions loomed large, a ghost that could not be exorcised, but I refused to let it define me. In the quiet moments, when the darkness threatened to overwhelm, I clung to the knowledge that I had escaped, that I had survived his twisted games. The fear would always be a part of me, a reminder of what had been lost, but it was also a testament to my resilience, a symbol of the strength I had found in the face of unimaginable horror. In time, I would learn to live with the shadows, their presence a reminder of the darkness that existed in the world and within those we think we know. But I would also find light in friendships rekindled, in new beginnings, in the simple joys that life still had to offer. The horror of Stephen's Last Supper was a scar upon my soul, a mark that could not be erased. But it was also a lesson, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is hope, and in the face of unimaginable fear, there is the potential for rebirth. The evening began with an innocuous enough allure, a shimmering invitation that found its way into my hands, promising an exquisite dining experience aboard a ferry that would sail along the Hudson under a blanket of stars. My curiosity was piqued. New York City, with its cacophony of lights and life, was known for keeping secrets tucked away in its labyrinth of avenues and alleys. But this invitation seemed to whisper of secrets hidden on the water, just out of reach of the bustling metropolis. The ferry docked at a secluded pier, far from the tourists and the usual throng of commuters. It was an elegant vessel, with draped lights illuminating its decks and casting gentle reflections upon the dark waves below. The air was crisp, the city's skyscrapers painting a jagged line against the night sky. As I stepped aboard, I was greeted by the gentle hum of a string quartet, their music weaving through the air like an invisible thread, binding the guests together. Guests were dressed in attire befitting elegant gala, whispers of excitement and anticipation floating among the crowd. The atmosphere was one of calm sophistication, yet there was a palpable undercurrent of something more. I couldn't quite place it, but a certain tension lingered, like the faintest note of dissonance amidst a harmonious symphony. As the ferry began its smooth glide along the river, champagne flutes clinked, and hors d'oeuvres circulated, each bite a testament to culinary artistry. Conversations were polite, the patrons exchanging pleasantries without revealing too much of themselves. It was as though we were all part of an elaborate play, our roles carefully scripted, our dialogues rehearsed. Then, as dinner was announced, we were led to an elegant dining room adorned with opulent chandeliers and luxurious drapery. The ambiance was both comforting and unsettling, as though we had stepped into a world removed from reality, a place where time held its breath. I found myself seated at a table with an eclectic mix of individuals, each enigmatic in their manner, their eyes alight with the same curious anticipation that danced within me. The first course arrived, a delicate composition of flavors that lingered on the tongue, teasing the palate with its complexity. There was a deliberate artistry in the presentation, a subtlety that suggested a chef who understood the profound connection between food and experience. As we ate, a subtle unease began to creep into my awareness, as though the shadows in the corners of the room had begun to shift, stretching and bending under the weight of some unspoken knowledge. It was during the second course that the first disturbance occurred, a soft, almost imperceptible note of discord in the music, like a string plucked just slightly out of tune. The guests around me seemed unfazed, their conversations continuing unabated, but I could not shake the feeling that something intangible had shifted. Our host, a man of elegant demeanor and a voice that resonated with the authority of someone well-versed in commanding attention, rose to speak. He welcomed us once more, his words weaving a narrative of exclusivity and privilege. There was a peculiar gravity to his speech, a suggestion that what lay before us was not merely a meal, but a communion of something much deeper. As he spoke, I found my gaze drifting across the room, noticing the peculiar intensity with which the other guests regarded him. Their eyes were fixed as though entranced, and I felt a fleeting twinge of discomfort as I realized I too was captivated by his presence. The room was silent, the only sound the gentle lap of water against the hull, as his words wove an intricate tapestry of mystery and anticipation. The main course was unveiled with dramatic flair, a culinary masterpiece that drew gasps of admiration from the diners. Yet, as I savored the dish, a disquieting sensation settled over me. There was something profoundly unsettling about the flavors, a richness that bordered on decadence, an essence that seemed to whisper of forbidden indulgence. The room seemed to pulse with a latent energy, the air thickening with an inexplicable tension. It was then that the true nature of the evening began to reveal itself. As dessert was served, our host rose once more, his demeanor now one of solemn reverence. He spoke of tradition, of secrets passed down through generations, of a society bound by its shared appreciation for the extraordinary. His words were measured, each sentence carrying the weight of unspoken implications. The diners listened in rapt silence, their expressions a curious blend of anticipation and acceptance. I too felt myself drawn into his narrative, the threads of my curiosity weaving themselves into the fabric of his tale. And then, with a flourish that was almost theatrical, he revealed the truth. The dishes we had savored, The flavors we had relished were part of a ritual, a celebration of the most ancient and primal of human experiences. The food we had consumed was no ordinary fare. It was, he proclaimed with a solemn nod, the essence of humanity itself, a culinary exploration of the boundaries between the sacred and the profane. A murmur rippled through the room, a wave of realization crashing over the diners. I could feel my heart begin to race, a cold sweat breaking out along my spine as the implications of his words washed over me. Cannibalism, dressed in the guise of haute cuisine, had been served to us, and we had partaken without question, drawn into the ritual by the allure of exclusivity and the promise of an unforgettable experience. The room seemed to blur at the edges, the faces around me taking on a surreal quality as the magnitude of the revelations settled in. Panic welled within me, a desperate urge to escape. Yet I found myself rooted to the spot, caught in the gravity of the moment. The other guests, far from horrified, appeared almost serene, their expressions serene masks of acceptance. In that instant, I understood the true nature of the gathering. It was not merely a dinner, but an initiation, a rite of passage into a secret society that reveled in the taboos of the human condition. We had been tested, our boundaries pushed, our perceptions challenged, and now, having crossed the threshold, we stood on the brink of a world where morality was fluid, where the lines between right and wrong blurred into obscurity. As the ferry continued its journey along the river, my mind raced, grappling with the implications of what I had witnessed. The city skyline loomed in the distance, a reminder of the world I had left behind, the world to which I would soon return. Yet, even as I longed for the familiarity of the streets and the anonymity of the crowd, I knew that something within me had shifted, a part of my soul irrevocably altered by the experience. The night drew on, the ferry gliding through the water with an almost eerie calm. The music played on, a haunting melody that seemed to echo the turmoil within me. I watched as the other guests mingled, their conversations now tinged with a newfound camaraderie, a shared understanding that transcended words. As we disembarked, I felt the cool night air wash over me, a gentle reminder of the reality that awaited beyond the confines of the ferry. The city lights twinkled invitingly, a beacon of normalcy that beckoned me back into its embrace. Yet, as I walked down the gangplank, I knew that the memory of this night would linger, a shadow cast over the mundane routines of everyday life. In the days that followed, I found myself haunted by the experience, the knowledge of what I had unwittingly become a part of. The world continued on its course, indifferent to the secrets that simmered beneath its surface, but I could not shake the feeling that I had been irrevocably changed. The taste of that forbidden meal lingered on my tongue, a phantom reminder of the night I had danced along the edge of the abyss. And so, life resumed its steady rhythm, yet beneath the surface, a quiet dissonance remained. The city, with its myriad of stories and hidden corners, continued to hold its secrets close, and I, now an unwitting keeper of one of its darkest tales, moved through its streets with a newfound awareness of the shadows that lurked at the edges of perception. The ferry, with its clandestine allure, had returned me to the world, but in my heart, I knew that I would never be the same. The evening began like any other in the dimly lit corner of our favorite bar, a place we visited to escape the monotony of everyday life. The walls, adorned with fading photographs and old memorabilia, whispered stories of countless patrons who had come and gone. The air was thick with the familiar scent of spilled beer and the muted conversations of people attempting to drown their sorrows or celebrate fleeting victories. I sat in my usual spot at the bar, nursing a drink, watching the clock's GANs inch closer to midnight. The regulars were scattered throughout the room, huddled in their small groups or tucked away in shadowy corners. Each of us was absorbed in our own world. Until he walked in, an enigmatic figure whose presence seemed to absorb the room's ambient noise and draw all eyes towards him. He was impeccably dressed with a tailored suit that seemed out of place in our shabby hangout, yet it suited him perfectly. He moved with a grace that commanded attention, his eyes scanning the room as though he was searching for something or someone. When his gaze landed on me, I felt a peculiar sense of familiarity, though I was certain I had never seen him before. It was as if he knew something about me, something that I was yet to uncover myself. With an enigmatic smile he approached, his presence effortlessly parting the crowd. "May I join you?" he asked, his voice smooth and resonant, carrying an accent that was hard to place. Before I could respond, he had seated himself beside me, ordering a drink with the assuredness of a man who knew he wouldn't be refused. As we exchanged introductions, I learned his name was Vincent. There was an unsettling charm about him, a magnetism that made it difficult to look away. He spoke with a confidence that was both inviting and intimidating, effortlessly weaving stories of his travels to far-off places and adventures that seemed almost too extraordinary to be true. His tales were captivating, and as the evening unfolded, I found myself drawn deeper into his world. Each word was a thread, intricately woven into a tapestry of intrigue and mystery. Yet, beneath the surface of his stories lurked an undercurrent that was disquieting, a sense that not everything was as it seemed. At some point, he leaned closer, his eyes fixing on mine with an intensity that was almost hypnotic. "I have an invitation for you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet his words resonated within me as though he had spoken them aloud. An opportunity to experience something beyond the ordinary. I found myself nodding, captivated by the promise of the unknown, even as a small voice in the back of my mind urged caution. He slid a card across the table, its surface blank save for a single address embossed in silver. "Come tomorrow night," he instructed, before standing abruptly and melding back into the throng, his departure as fluid as his arrival. Once he was gone, the bar seemed to exhale collectively, the noise and chatter resuming their normal pace. I glanced around, half expecting someone to mention the mysterious stranger, but the regulars seemed unfazed, as if Vincent's presence had been a figment of my imagination. The following day was a blur of anticipation and unease. The address on the card burned in my pocket, a constant reminder of the previous night's encounter. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the precipice of something monumental, yet I was unable to discern if it was an ascent. When night fell, I found myself standing outside a nondescript building on a quiet street. The facade was unremarkable, yet there was an aura about it that hinted at hidden depths. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside, the door closing behind me with a soft click that echoed in the silence. The interior was a stark contrast to the bar's worn and familiar ambiance. It was opulent, with high ceilings and grand chandeliers casting a warm glow over the room. A small group of people, each as impeccably dressed as Vincent had been, milled about, their conversations a low hum of anticipation. Vincent appeared from the crowd, his presence a beacon among the strangers. He greeted me with a nod, his smile as enigmatic as ever. "I'm glad you came," he said, gesturing for me to follow. He led me through the room, weaving between guests who seemed both curious and indifferent, As though they were accustomed to new faces, we stopped before a grand staircase that spiraled upwards, disappearing into shadows. Vincent gestured towards it, his eyes glinting with the promise of revelation. "What lies beyond is unlike anything you've experienced," he said, his voice a tantalizing murmur. I hesitated, the weight of his words settling over me like a shroud. Yet the allure of the unknown was too potent to resist, and I found myself ascending the stairs, each step echoing in the silence. Vincent followed behind, his presence a comforting shadow. At the top of the staircase, we entered a room that was both opulent and unsettling. The walls were adorned with portraits of people whose eyes seemed to follow my every move, their expressions a mix of curiosity and knowing. In the center of the room stood a grand table, laden with an assortment of foods and drinks that appeared untouched. Vincent guided me to a seat, his demeanor shifting from host to something more akin to a conductor orchestrating a symphony. As the other guests gathered, their faces obscured by masks, a sense of unreality seeped into the air, thickening the atmosphere with an almost tangible tension. The evening unfolded in a series of events that defied logic. Each course of the meal brought with it a story, narrated by Vincent with a finesse that bordered on theatrical. Yet, as the stories progressed, they grew increasingly disturbing, blurring the line between fiction and reality. It was as though he was weaving a spell, drawing us all into a web of his creation. I found myself questioning the nature of the gathering, the motives of its host, and the identities of the masked guests. But each inquiry was met with an enigmatic smile, a wordless affirmation of my growing suspicion that I had stepped into a world where the boundaries of reality were pliable and uncertain. As the night wore on, the sense of dread intensified, an invisible noose tightening around my chest. I glanced at the other guests, searching for some sign of shared trepidation, but their features were inscrutable behind their masks. The room's opulence felt claustrophobic, the grand chandeliers casting long shadows that seemed to flicker with life of their own. Finally, as the clock approached the witching hour, Vincent rose from his seat, his movements deliberate and measured. He raised a glass, his voice ringing out with a solemnity that sent a shiver through me. "To the discovery of truths," he intoned, his gaze sweeping over the room, settling on me with a weight that was almost palpable. "May we embrace that which lies beyond the veil of understanding." In that moment, the room seemed to shift, the air crackling with a charge that was both exhilarating and terrifying. It was as though the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable conclusion to a story that had been in motion long before I had stepped into the bar the night before. The guests raised their glasses in silent accord, but as the liquid touched my lips, a revelation unfurled within me, a realization that I had been drawn into something far greater than a mere evening of intrigue. The invitation had not been a whim, but a summons to a realm where reality was mutable and the cost of admission was yet to be revealed. I set the glass down, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. The faces in the portrait seemed to watch with an intensity that bordered on accusatory, their painted eyes piercing through the veneer of the moment. Vincent approached, his expression inscrutable as ever, though there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Was it satisfaction? "You have a choice," he said, his voice barely audible over the thundering of my heart. "To remain in this moment, or to step back into the world you know, with the knowledge of what lies beyond." The weight of his words hung in the air, a choice that was no choice at all. For how could one return to the mundane after glimpsing the extraordinary? even if the latter came with its own set of perils. Yet the thought of remaining, of surrendering to the unknown, was equally daunting. In the end, it was neither logic nor desire that guided my decision, but an instinct buried deep within, urging me towards the door. With a final glance at Vincent, I turned and left the room, descending the staircase with a heart heavy with secrets. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin, a balm against the charged atmosphere I had left behind. The street was quiet, the world seemingly unchanged, yet I felt different, as though I had shed a skin I hadn't known I was wearing. As I walked away, the lingering fear that had taken root within me echoed with every step. It was a whisper of the unknown, a reminder of the night I'd been invited to glimpse a world beyond my comprehension, and the knowledge that such invitations were rarely singular. For once the door was opened, it was only a matter of time before it beckoned again, waiting for the curious and the bold to step through.
I remember the first time I visited Addie's apartment. Nestled on the third floor of an old brownstone, it exuded a kind of vintage charm that felt both comforting and slightly unsettling. The dim lighting cast long shadows that danced across the walls as the evening sun dipped below the horizon. The place smelled of aged wood and the faint aroma of incense, mingling to create an ambience that was uniquely Addie's. She had always been a collector of peculiar objects, artifacts she claimed held stories within them. These items adorned shelves and tables, turning her apartment into a museum of the strange and wonderful. Addie's fascination with the esoteric was something we discussed countless times over late-night coffee and spirited debates. She had an insatiable curiosity about the world beyond the scene, and her apartment was a reflection of that. Each artifact she owned had a story, a purpose, and most importantly, a connection to a world I was hesitant to engage with. Yet, I found myself drawn to these oddities, compelled by a morbid curiosity that tugged at the edges of my skepticism. It was during one of these visits that Addie introduced me to something she referred to as the ritual. It was, as she described, an ancient practice meant to open a path, a bridge between our world and another. She spoke of it with such reverence that, despite my doubts, I couldn't help but be intrigued. The ritual required a specific set of symbols, ones that she had painstakingly collected over the years. These symbols, she insisted, were the keys to unlocking a Faustian bargain with a force she would only refer to as the Whisperer. At first, I dismissed her words as little more than an eccentric indulgence. Yet, as she explained the intricate details, my skepticism began to waver. The methodical nature of the ritual appealed to my sense of logic, while the mystery of it challenged my understanding of reality. Addie's enthusiasm was infectious, and soon we found ourselves planning an evening to perform the ritual together. The night we chose was unremarkable, a cool autumn evening where the leaves rustled softly in the breeze, whispering secrets of their own. Inside her apartment, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Addie had arranged the symbols on a low wooden table in the center of the living room. They were curious things, etched onto small stone tiles, each one different yet connected to the others in an intricate pattern. As we prepared to begin, a nervous energy hung between us. Addie explained that the ritual required absolute focus and a willingness to accept whatever came forth. I nodded, though a part of me remained skeptical. What could possibly happen from a few stones and whispered words? The first disturbance came unexpectedly. As Addie recited the incantation, the room grew noticeably colder. A chill swept through the air, causing the hair on my arms to stand on end. I glanced at her, and she met my gaze with a knowing look, a mixture of excitement and concern. We continued, despite the unease that began to creep into my thoughts. The symbols glowed softly, their edges shimmering with an ethereal light that seemed to pulse with each word uttered. It was mesmerizing, and I found myself entranced, unable to look away. Then, A soft sound reached my ears, a whisper, so faint it was almost imperceptible. I strained to hear, but it was like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. Addie seemed unfazed, or perhaps she was simply more adept at concealing her apprehension. She continued the incantation, her voice steady, unwavering. The whispering grew louder, more distinct, echoing through the room in a language I couldn't comprehend, but somehow understood on a primal level. It was as if the very air was alive, breathing secrets into our minds. The escalation was gradual, an insidious creeping of shadows that stretched and twisted in unnatural ways. The room felt larger, deeper, as if the walls had receded into a vast darkness. I could sense a presence, something old and powerful, lingering just beyond the edge of perception. It was then I realized that what we had summoned was not bound by our understanding of reality. The Whisperer was here, observing, waiting. Fear prickled at the edges of my consciousness, but I pushed it aside, determined to see this through. The symbols began to shift, rearranging themselves on the table in a fluid dance that defied logic. Addie's eyes were wide, her expression a mixture of awe and trepidation. I wanted to speak, to ask if she knew what was happening, but the words caught in my throat. The climax arrived with a suddenness that left me breathless. The whispers crescendoed into a symphony of voices, each one distinct yet part of a greater whole. The air crackled with energy, and the symbols erupted into a blaze of light that filled the room with an otherworldly glow. I felt a pull, as if something was reaching out from the depths of the shadows to claim us. In that moment, I understood the nature of the bargain. The Whisperer offered knowledge, power, a glimpse into the secrets of the universe. But there was a price, a tethering of sorts, an inescapable connection that would bind us to its will. The choice was ours, a decision that hung heavy in the air. Addie turned to me, her eyes searching mine for an answer. Her resolve wavered, and in her gaze, I saw the reflection of my own fear. We had delved too deep, and the consequences were beyond our control. The Whisperer waited, patient and eternal, for our choice. In the end, we chose to retreat. With trembling hands, Addie scattered the symbols, breaking the connection with a whispered plea. The light dimmed, the whispers faded, and the oppressive presence withdrew, leaving behind an echo of its power that lingered in the air. The room returned to normal, the shadows once again familiar and mundane. Yet the experience had left its mark, an indelible imprint on our souls. We sat in silence, the weight of what we had encountered pressing down on us. The knowledge of what lay just beyond the veil was both a burden and a gift, a reminder of the limits of our understanding. In the days that followed, I found myself haunted by the memory of that night. The Whisperer's presence lingered at the edges of my thoughts, a constant reminder of the world we had glimpsed. Addie, too, seemed changed, her fascination with the esoteric tempered by a newfound caution. We spoke of the experience only in hushed tones, wary of drawing its attention once more. And so, the fear lingers, a shadow that stretches into the corners of my mind. I find myself returning to Addie's apartment, drawn not by curiosity, but by a strange comfort in the familiarity of the unknown. The symbols remain, their secrets locked away until the next time they are called to dance. In the quiet moments, I hear the faintest echo of a whisper, a reminder of the bargain we dared not make, and the presence that still watches from the shadows. Have you ever experienced a moment so perfectly orchestrated, so meticulously planned that its flawless execution brought about a sense of profound satisfaction? That's how I felt that night, a night which began seemingly ordinary, with the mischievous delight of a prank. Little did I know, the night would unravel in ways I could never have imagined. I live in a cozy, modest house tucked away in the suburbs, a place that embodies the epitome of normalcy with its neat, predictable rows of homes and well-manicured lawns. My friends and I, a close-knit group bound by shared history and countless memories, often gathered here. We thrived on practical jokes, simple pleasures that broke the monotony of suburban life. Our laughter, The sound that often echoed through the walls was the heartbeat of his home. That evening, we sat around my living room, the warm glow of the lamps casting comforting shadows. The room, filled with familiar artifacts of our adventures, was our haven. Michael, with his usual infectious energy, suggested a prank that would outdo all others, a plan so audacious it was irresistible. The target, Sam, our friend with a penchant for skepticism and a love for rationality. The plan, to convince him that my house was haunted, an idea double-edged with dark humor. We intended to exploit Sam's disbelief, to orchestrate an evening that would chip away at his steadfast rationalism. It was meant to be harmless, a playful jab at his unyielding logic. The setup was simple yet effective. We would use Bluetooth speakers hidden around the house to play eerie sounds and flicker the lights using an app on my phone. A few well-timed knocks and creaks would complete the illusion. We were giddy with anticipation, our minds whirling with possibilities. As dusk descended, Sam arrived, oblivious to the machinations unfolding around him. We welcomed him with all the usual pleasantries, hiding our mirth beneath the veneer of casual conversation. The evening progressed smoothly, our chatter punctuated by bouts of laughter as we feigned interest in mundane topics, all the while waiting for the right moment to initiate our plan. The first disturbance was subtle. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper floated through the air, carried by the hidden speakers. Sam paused mid-sentence, his brow furrowed in confusion. We exchanged furtive glances, struggling to suppress our amusement. The whisper receded, leaving behind an air of uncertainty, like a thin veil draped over the room. As the night continued, we gradually escalated our efforts. The whispers grew more pronounced, evolving into incoherent murmurs that seemed to seep through the walls. The lights flickered sporadically, casting shadows that danced with sinister intent. Sam's skepticism wavered, his confident demeanor fraying at the edges. He laughed it off initially, attributing it to faulty wiring or the wind, but there was an edge to his laughter, a slight tremor that betrayed his unease. The air grew heavy with anticipation. We were on the brink of laughter, the tension of a palpable threat binding us together. Yet, beneath our amusement lay an undercurrent of something darker, a thrill that bordered on the malicious. We had pushed Sam far enough, and it was time to reveal our ruse. However, the night had other plans. It was at the stroke of midnight that things took an unexpected turn. The whisper ceased, replaced by a deafening silence that wrapped around us like a shroud. The lights, which had flickered in playful jest, now dimmed ominously, leaving us in a twilight of shadows. Sam's face, illuminated by the fading glow of the lamp, was a mask of uncertainty. Then came the knocks, 3 quick, deliberate raps that echoed through the silence, resonating from the hallway. We froze, our laughter dying in our throats, replaced by a creeping dread. This wasn't part of the prank. A chill swept over us, the air heavy with foreboding. "What's going on?" Sam's voice cut through the silence, tinged with a fear that mirrored our own. We had no answer, our plan unraveling before our eyes. The knocks came again, insistent and demanding, as if something unseen was seeking entry. Compelled by a mix of curiosity and trepidation, we ventured towards the source of the sound, each step echoing in the oppressive silence. The hallway stretched before us, a tunnel of shadows leading to the unknown. The air was thick with tension, every creak of the floorboards amplifying our unease. At the end of the hallway, the door to the basement stood ajar, a gaping maw beckoning us forward. The rational part of me screamed to turn back, to retreat to the safety of the known. But curiosity, that insidious urge, propelled us forward. We descended the stairs, our footsteps hesitant, the air growing colder with each step. The basement was as we left it, cluttered with the detritus of forgotten projects and old furniture. Yet it felt different, charged with a presence we couldn't see but could feel, like the weight of a gaze upon your back. The knocks came again, impossibly from within the room, resonating through the walls. Panic set in, the realization that our prank had spiraled beyond our control. We fumbled with our phones, trying to dispel the illusion we had created, but the app refused to respond, our laughter turning to silence as the full gravity of our situation settled over us. And then, as abruptly as it began, the disturbances ceased. The lights returned to their steady glow, the whispers silenced, the knocks no more than a memory. We stood there, hearts pounding, unsure of what had transpired. Our prank, it seemed, had taken on a life of its own, a dark reflection of our intentions. We retreated to the living room, our joviality replaced by a somber understanding. Sam, shaken but reassured by the return to normalcy, laughed off the events as an elaborate hoax. Yet there lingered an unease, a silent question unasked, hanging in the air between us. As the night wore on, my friends departed, leaving behind an empty house filled with shadows and unanswered questions. I was left alone with the echoes of our laughter, now tinged with a sense of foreboding. What had we unleashed in our pursuit of amusement? Was it simply coincidence, or had we tapped into something far beyond our comprehension? Sleep eluded me, my mind replaying the events of the evening with relentless clarity. The knocks, the whispers, the oppressive silence, it all looped through my thoughts, a haunting refrain that refused to fade. As dawn broke, I was no closer to understanding, my mind mired in doubt and uncertainty. The following days passed in a blur of routine, the memory of that night a persistent shadow that trailed me. Despite our best efforts to laugh it off, a sliver of fear remained, a lingering doubt that refused to be banished. I found myself avoiding the basement, the mere thought of it sending a shiver down my spine. And then, one evening, as I sat alone in the dimly lit living room, the whispers returned. Faint, barely audible, yet unmistakable. They wove through the silence, a tapestry of unease that wrapped around me like a cold embrace. The knocks followed, a staccato beat that echoed from the depths of the house. Heart pounding, I rose to my feet, driven by a mix of fear and curiosity. The hallway stretched before me, an endless corridor of shadows leading to the unknown. I hesitated, every instinct urging me to turn back. But something compelled me forward, a whispering echo that drew me towards the basement door. It lay open, as if inviting me to step into the darkness it concealed. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence a living thing that pressed against my senses. I descended the stairs, each step resonating with a hollow finality. The basement loomed, a cavernous void that seemed to swallow the light. As I reached the bottom, the whispers ceased, leaving behind a profound silence. I stood there, enveloped by the shadows, a participant in a game I no longer understood. The knocks came again, soft yet insistent, a gentle reminder of the forces at play. In that moment, I understood the folly of our actions, the consequences of meddling with forces beyond our comprehension. The prank, a simple jest, had unleashed something far darker, a manifestation of our own hubris and recklessness. I turned away, the weight of realization settling over me. The basement, with its shadows and secrets, would remain unexplored, a testament to the folly of our actions. As I ascended the stairs, the whispers resumed, a haunting melody that would follow me, a reminder of the night we dared to play with darkness. In the weeks that followed, the whispers became a part of my existence, a constant companion in the silence of the night. They whispered of secrets untold, of shadows that lurked just beyond the edge of life. I learned to live with them, to accept their presence as a consequence of our actions. Yet, beneath my acceptance lay a lingering fear, a silent question that haunted my thoughts. What had we truly awakened in our pursuit of amusement? A prank gone wrong, or a doorway to something far more sinister? The answers eluded me, hidden within the shadows of my home. As I lay awake in the stillness of the night, the whispers weaving through the silence, I understood that some questions were best left unanswered. The darkness, with its secrets and shadows, would remain a part of me, a reminder of the night we danced with forces unknown. And in that understanding, I found a semblance of peace, a fragile balance between fear and acceptance as the whispers continued their haunting refrain.